Привет! Greetings from Lviv in Ukraine. I'm here on the ground again. If you want to know more about coming to Ukraine in 2025, a video from yesterday, go and look at it on the channel. Actually, you know what? I'll put it down in the video description to this one. So I can verify, because I'm here on the ground, there is no ceasefire in Ukraine. Russia continues to attack as they have not struck the city of Lviv, where I'm standing so far since I arrived on Easter Sunday. However, Kyiv was very heavily attacked last night. The night before that, Odessa, Mama, on the shores of the Black Sea, where I may go pretty soon. And it's interesting if you look at the peace process, in inverted commas, that the Trump administration has undertaken in a quest to get what, well, the first thing they should have been trying to get is a ceasefire, get the two sides stop firing at each other, but they more or less failed to get that at all, really, in any meaningful way in the last almost 100 days, and that milestone of 100 days is very important for U.S. presidents to show some progress. You know, they basically get, to a certain extent, judged at the beginning of their term, and Donald Trump famously campaigned, in part, not that I think he made that big a difference in the election, that he would get this war resolved in a day. But now we're coming up to 100 days, and it's proved to be a lot harder than he anticipated. And he's now proposed, it seems, there's some leaks of a draft peace proposal, and he has still not gotten to a ceasefire. And we had the Easter Sunday ceasefire by Russia, which just meant not firing rockets for a day at the cities, I guess, in the center of Ukraine. But then they started doing that just about afterwards. And in the meantime, anyways, they were shooting at each other, both sides, along the line of contact, in, you know, which would be normally huge amounts, but this is the biggest war in Europe since World War II, so I guess it was a little less intense for maybe a day, 2 days, and things have gone back to being even more intense than before in terms of aerial bombardments of Ukraine cities. Many civilians killed, I think almost 10 in Kyiv this morning. So basically, it's hardly noteworthy in the Western press, because unless Russia commits such a big atrocity that they're going to have to kill a few dozen people, lots of children, to even make the news anymore. People have become so used to Russia behaving in this terroristic way that it just seems to be par for the course. It's pretty sad and tragic to see that being normalized. And so far, the Trump administration has completely failed to get a ceasefire. Ukraine says it's open to a 30-day ceasefire, but Russia then says, well, we don't want the Ukrainians to be able to rearm or use that 30 days to do anything militarily, to put themselves in a better position. So basically, until that gets agreed to, they're going to keep firing stuff. They call certain things ceasefire that are not ceasefires. And yeah, Russia doesn't want any constraints itself getting material from its allies like Iran, North Korea, and to a certain extent China. So the Trump administration has kind of tried to bypass this ceasefire step because they failed to get it, and now they put an ultimatum basically to both sides. It, on the face of it, seems to lean very heavily in favor of Russia. Basically, if you look at the language that Donald Trump has used and his administration since they maybe 10 days or 2 weeks after they took office, they basically see Ukraine as being the weaker party, having no cards to play, and basically they've decided to back Russia and weight the peace agreement, draft peace agreement, more heavily in their favor. If we look at the situation on the ground on both sides' strategic aims, and Ukraine and its president Volodymyr Zelensky has already said no, because the first part of the proposed peace agreement is to have de jure legal recognition of Crimea as being part of Russia, and just Zelensky says it's a non-starter. So there's lots of other terms that are not probably palatable to Ukraine as well, but that just makes it a non-starter from their point of view. Others include never joining NATO, also that basically they would have to de facto, it's a bit weird to me to say you're going to de facto recognize the other occupied territory that's currently been Russian. That's just a de facto situation, but it may imply that Ukraine maybe can't take that back for some reason in the future by military force. It's hard for me to really understand. It's still pretty vague. Also, that there would be no U.S. security guarantee. There's some vague language about other countries providing it. However, they probably lack the capacity to provide a real deterrent to further Russian aggression, unless they're going to provide some sort of nuclear deterrence, which doesn't seem likely. So that would also basically be a non-starter for Ukraine. Why would they stop if that would just allow Russia to rebuild their military. Because another point is to lift all sanctions, US to lift all sanctions on Russia. Now, many of the sanctions against Russia are also from Ukraine's other allies like the European Union and the UK, so it's hard to know how that would work in practice. However, in principle, it'll just allow Russia to rebuild their military and their economy to keep their war potential going and presumably come back at a later date and just take another bite at the cherry, so to say, and try to seize control of Ukraine. Another term would be there would be compensation to Ukraine to help rebuild the country. That presumably would come from the frozen Russian assets that are currently held in Western financial institutions, primarily in the European Union. So apparently there's about 300 billion US dollars there, or euros there, is pretty much around that ballpark. And that wouldn't cover the cost of rebuilding Ukraine, but it would go part of the way at least. Concessions by Russia in this, well, basically they currently control the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, and that would apparently put under US control, and then the power would go to both Russia and Ukraine. I can't see either side being particularly interested in that. Russia will withdraw from a small part of Ukrainian territory that in the Kharkiv Oblast that they currently control. There's like two little enclaves basically that they control there. And I didn't see anything written about the tiny slivers of Russian territory that Ukraine controls. Presumably Ukraine would have to withdraw from those as well. And basically there would be some neutral navigation possibility on the river Dnipro, or the Dnieper River. Yeah, so that would basically be concessions by Russia, but considering Russia has no legal right to any of that territory whatsoever, and they are fully legally responsible for actually all of the rebuilding of Ukraine, and Ukraine under international law does have a right to join any organizations it wants. The fact that it would be compelled not to rule out NATO membership, they all look like massive compromises and concessions to Russia. However, would Russia even agree to this, even presuming, well, Ukraine's already ruled it out, but say Volodymyr Zelensky capitulated and signed such an agreement, I'm not so sure would ever pass muster in Ukraine itself, but let's just assume in that scenario that was the case. Would Russia actually agree to it? Because Russian nationalists, I read Gherkin, who has been heavily involved since 2014 in Russia's invasions, and he's under some sort of detention in Russia. It seems at the moment he's maybe a potential threat to Vladimir Putin, although not a significant one. And he said Russia shouldn't sign it because anyways they control those territories. The US has already ruled out, under this administration at least, Ukraine joining, and there are plenty of other European members of NATO that would veto it anyways, so they're not going to get that. And yeah, obviously the Trump mandate is for over another 3 years. So why would Russia even sign it? They can just keep fighting unless their economy is about to collapse immediately, or their military. They wouldn't seem, from his point of view, to have any incentive. They should just go for the jugular now and keep fighting and push through, not do what Vladimir Putin decided to do in 2014 and 15, which was not try to go all in to seize Kyiv and replace the government. That was something that was criticized by ultranationalists in Russia, and they think that he is way too reserved in terms of achieving the strategic goals. I mean, the strategic goals, from what I can see, are the same anyways, but Putin has a more risk-averse approach to things, and they criticize that. So would Putin risk the ire of the ultranationalists in Russia and sign such an agreement? I think he is in strong enough position in Russia at the moment that he would probably ignore them as a threat, and if he were so inclined, sign it. However, I don't think he is, because he would probably calculate that, yeah, unless he starts to lose on the battlefield, or the economy is just about to collapse, or he's politically in trouble, then why not just wait and see and keep fighting? Maybe he can get even more concessions. Maybe he can get the Americans to pull out of somewhere in the Baltics in the meantime as part of the agreement. If Donald Trump is so keen to get a deal before the 100-day benchmark of his presidency, as it seems, then at least wait another 10 days or whatever it is. Well, actually, we're on the 24th, so I guess he only has a few more days. But after that, maybe he's going to be still pliable to doing deals with Russia. Maybe he'll just lift the sanctions anyways and legally recognize Crimea even without a deal. Who knows? So maybe Putin, from his point of view, will rationalize that way that he can probably still get the same concessions or even better ones if he holds out. As I've been saying on this channel for the last year, Russia faces three main challenges in 2025. They are man, power, material, and money, the three M's. And their economy, while still not in free fall or anything, is under significant pressure, and it will continue to be so, especially towards the end of this year. Also material, they are expected to start running out of a lot of the old Soviet stocks by the end of this year. And then manpower, they have enough manpower at the moment. However, recruitment has been down in Russia compared to last year. So it's not clear to me that with the current incentive structure, which is avoiding a new mobilization, they had a partial mobilization of 300,000 men in the autumn of 2022, whether they can keep going. But for the next few months, they're probably fine on all of those three. They're really going to become bigger issues towards the end of the year and into 2026. So yeah, I guess at this juncture, looking at it rationally from his negotiating position, America's making so many concessions and he doesn't anticipate that's suddenly going to be reversed. Why wouldn't he hold out for more from Ukraine's point of view? They just think that it's Russia, there's nothing to stop Russia pocketing those concessions in such a peace deal and just coming back in a couple of years and trying to take the whole place again. And it would cause a lot of tension within Ukrainian society if they were, for example, to recognize the illegal annexation of Crimea as de jure, having legal effect, because that could splinter national unity. And actually, it's not clear to me if Vladimir Zelensky could continue on as president if he were to sign such a deal. Now, what would happen in a new election? Well, I can't really see in that scenario a pro-peace deal candidate winning in Ukraine. What would a new president do? Looking at Irish history, since I was born in Ireland and I'm an Irishman, the Irish signed a treaty in 1922 with the British government. They didn't get full independence, but they got kind of a compromise where they got some autonomy, and that led to a civil war in Ireland. So that's where I'm talking about the internal tensions, and eventually the pro-treaty forces won. However, because Ireland was a democracy in the 1930s, the anti-treaty forces, once they've been reorganized politically, they actually won the election, and they just decided to start tearing up parts of that treaty they actually signed previously with the United Kingdom. And things had changed for the UK in the meantime. They had obviously huge issues in the 1930s with rivals in Europe, so Germany and other fascist governments like Italy, for example, and Spain later on with Franco, that they weren't in a position to start having to deal with the Irish, the pesky Irish again. So they actually basically had to acquiesce with Ireland breaking many terms of that treaty. So interesting, if you look at that as a historical perspective, whether that would indicate what could happen in such a scenario in Ukraine. So I'm going to leave it at that. Drop your comments down below what you think of the Trump administration's attempts at getting a ceasefire. It sounds noble enough, trying to get people to stop killing each other, but it clearly hasn't worked so far. And this leaked proposed peace deal, I think it was the Telegraph that leaked it. Whether you think the terms acceptable to either side, and whether it's realistic that Donald Trump gets a peace agreement, and let me know what you think of his strategy so far. So I will leave it at that. Slava Ukraini, this is written on my t-shirt. A little bit of traffic as we come up to it's around 5 p.m. here in Lviv local time, and I will see you in the next video. Do побачення.